is Rina Shah. She's a political analyst and current affairs commentator. She's also the CEO of Relax Strategies. Great to have you on the program again, Rina. Now, of course, on Roe's 50th anniversary, tell us what the new reality for women seeking an abortion across the US is.
Well, for the first time in 50 years, every American woman of reproductive age across the nation is knowing that she must know her reproductive rights in her state. Now, that is a real change because for 50 years, it's been the law of the land that anybody can terminate a pregnancy under the stipulations laid out in the Roe versus Wade decision. But now, what it's come down to, if you have a pregnancy that needs to be terminated for medical reasons, or should you desire to, at a certain point, you need to know the laws on the books in your state. And that has really awakened a serious consciousness, particularly in American millennial women, those born after 1981.
It's difficult, though, because it's still not clear, really, in a variety of states. The Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe hasn't really settled things. A state-by-state legal fight is playing out in courtrooms around the country, like in Arizona and Georgia. Is this now how it's going to work? Entirely down to states? Is there going to be a patchwork of laws across the country without any federal involvement at all?
Well, certainly there will be no federal involvement unless the Biden administration does more and those Democrats in Congress do more. Now, there was serious talk about how this was on Democrats' hands, the Dobbs decision of last year by the Supreme Court. The Democrats for years could have codified Roe versus Wade into law. Now, here we sit in a moment where the reality is that last year, 13 states had trigger laws that went into effect that made a termination of a pregnancy quite punitive. Now, it depended on what state you were looking at. But again, when you look at this and you listen to conservatives, you hear conservatives say, hey, this is no big deal, the overturn of Roe versus Wade. All this did was kick the issue of abortion back to the states. But then you hear liberals jump in and say, hey, this is a free country. And if I don't have freedom over my uterus, then I don't really have freedom at all. So what really this all comes down to is this one phrase, and it's bodily autonomy. And again, what you're hearing from liberals is that if women do not have bodily autonomy, they're not really full citizens in this democracy, this representative democracy we have. Women, if they're not able to control their bodies, then they're really not able to control much of their lives. And then you hear, again, conservatives talk about abortion for years and say it was state-sanctioned murder. And all this does is allow a community to decide what's best for the individual.
Talk us more about that. I mean, anti-abortion campaigners are split over where to take the movement now. Some want to focus on pushing more stringent restrictions. Others want to focus on bolstering the social safety net for parents and families. What about these divisions? Tell us, where these divisions lie in the pro-life movement.
Well, I think it's really important to note that the pro-life movement really energized itself, of course, when Roe versus Wade became the law of the land, and they've been stringent. They, in their real rules for what is life. And they really felt that there should be nobody that comes between what happens between God and the life in their womb. So it's not even the woman who's carrying that life. And that's one thing that I've heard from especially evangelical right-wing Republicans is that this is something between God and a woman. But again, you hear on the left the sense that this is about a woman and her doctor and her being able to make a decision that she should wish for. The real interesting part here, though, that I'd like our audience to know is that in 2008, when the Affordable Care Act passed, I was a senior aide to 2 Republican members of Congress in that era. And I would say that the talking points from the Republican Party at that time didn't quite square up with the talking points that you would think that they'd use now. And the talking point was that there should never be a government bureaucrat in the exam room. Nobody should come between an American patient and their doctor. And this is the exact opposite you're hearing now. So regardless of how you feel about the issue of terminating a pregnancy, you know that the Republican Party is saying, hey, we need to get involved. We can't let the woman and her doctor make that decision. So what that's also done is open the door for medical doctors to really feel like they're under a microscope.
Right, Rina, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time. Rina Shah, political analyst and current affairs commentator.